session is putting the R in RLA. This is the first time we're offering the session. I'm very excited to give this a try. There's a lot of ideas that I've been chewing on in the last few years, and they're finally kind of coming together in this presentation. My name is Penny Brown. I work for Southwest Metro Intermediate District. I'm located in Shakopee, which is a suburb that is southwest of Minneapolis. And I work in really essentially what's a pre-GED, GED classes. My students enter classes when they are at a 4.0 on a TABE M. They come to me and then they're with me until they've earned a GED or move on to employment or whatever takes them out of our program. So I'm kind of the last stop in our program. Today, we're going to begin with a discussion on extended response that I think is very timely. On the sessions that I attended earlier today, this discussion was actually happening organically, and I want to give people a time to kind of have a deeper discussion on that. And then I'm going to move into some activities that you could use either online or in-person classes to help students develop reasoning skills. And we're going to look at things at a picture level, a sentence level, and then at a document level. I am told that my Wi-Fi, there is a little bit of a lag from time to time, so I encourage you to turn on closed captioning on your screen. And so if my audio, for whatever reason, cuts out, you're still able to kind of hear what I say. For that reason, I am going to go off camera, and I don't have any links pre-opened, so you'll need to give me just a moment or two when I come to links to get stuff to loaded. If you're not familiar with the GED test, in 2014, a new version came out. We have a new version every 12 years, and we're halfway through that cycle now. And one of the pieces about that new test that have been more controversial than others has been the extended response. In an extended response, students are given 2 documents of persuasive text. The documents have different points of view on an issue, and the students are required to type many paragraphs that are comparing and contrasting and evaluating the quality of evidence, okay, who really responding to a prompt, who had the stronger argument, okay? And a lot of work has been done in this area, but in my experience, and I know I am hearing, especially at this conference today, other people are having this experience, that even despite a lot of efforts, students are going to a GED and they're earning 0 points on the extended response. And they're getting 0 points on an extended response and they're passing, or they're passing with actually a fairly high score. So they're earning a GED and they're scoring 0 on this. So thoughts that I have had, an internal debate that I have had going on in my mind for several years is kind of summed up in, this is a comment that a colleague indicated to me, and this is kind of a thought that has definitely crossed my mind that I've debated. My students are earning a GED without receiving any points on an extended response. So I have stopped teaching it, okay? Now, I'm not saying that I have stopped teaching it, but I understand the thought process, okay? This is something that people have shared with me and I kind of understand. So what I'd like everybody to do for just a moment is, on a sheet of paper at home, jot down your initial reactions to that statement. Okay, in a minute, I'm going to give you an opportunity to delve into your reaction and have a deeper discussion on sort of that idea. But before we do that, What I want to do is kind of explain sort of what I'm expecting here in the next 15 minutes. We are going to put you in a breakout room. And we are going to, in the chat box, we're going to put a link to a writing sample. This is a writing sample that came from one of the students in my class. This student has earned his GED and is no longer in my class. And he did earn 0 points on his essay. This is a practice essay, so it was done untimed. This is not what he produced in 45 minutes. It took him, I think, between 1 and 2 hours to produce this. And this is after having written about 10 other practice essays over the course of a year. And it is having used paragraph frames. So to just give you a frame of reference. Once you read it, you will also probably recognize that he is also an English language learner, okay? I don't have really strong opinions about that. It isn't, I'm not sure this because I think it's a fabulous writing sample. But what I'd like you to do in your breakout rooms is take a minute or two to read through that writing sample. And then I'd like you to respond to the question, what does this writing sample illustrate about a writer's ability to reason and to communicate? And really the bigger question that we're getting at between reacting to this quote, please share your reactions in your breakout rooms, share kind of your reaction to the writing sample. But really the bigger question we're getting at is, to what extent should test content drive our curriculum? So if you're in session and you're not a GED teacher, you're not familiar with it, I still think there's a lot you can get from this conversation. Just change GED to a TABE test or a CASAS test, and we're kind of talking about the same thing. All right, after the breakout room, we are going to give you a full 15 minutes to kind of discuss those issues. And I might even bop in once or twice, so don't be surprised if I eavesdrop on your conversation. I am going to ask one person from each group to prepare a 1 or 2 sentence summary of your conversation to share with the larger group in chat. Okay, so briefly, your reaction to this quote, your reaction to the writing sample, your thoughts on the bigger question. Okay, and I just want to check, do we have the link to that sample in our chat box?
Yes, the link's in the chat box.
Okay, you're awesome. Thanks, Andy. If Gail, you can go ahead and open up the breakout rooms.
Okay, I'll send them in right now.
Okay, so you're back in the main room after a 15-minute discussion, and I understand there's a possibility that your discussion may have went on a tangent and other things that are important. Fine. Just want to remind you that the purpose was to kind of respond to this idea of whether or not I should teach something that earns 0 points on a test, whether, response to a writing sample, and then the bigger question, what extent should test drive our curriculum. So if you can pick, if we can have one member from each breakout room to chat a summary, a 1 or 2 sentence summary of your discussion, or if you can't do summary, one important takeaway from your discussion, I'd like you to put that in the chat box, and I'd encourage everybody to take a few minutes to just read the comments from your colleagues. Okay, Gail, I like that idea. Thank you for, I was wondering why let's go ahead and we'll just call on rooms one at a time. So the people who are in breakout room 1. Gail, does everybody know which room they were in?
I'm hoping that people noticed that.
Maybe not, I'm not sure I would have.
Yeah, I can actually, Penny, actually you have access to the breakout rooms, I think. I could just call on people. Do you want me to out of the room possibly?
Yeah, Gail, if that's okay. Yeah, I wouldn't, yeah, if we could have you do that. And again, we're not going to put people on the spot. So if somebody stepped away from their computer, we'll just ask somebody else from that group, okay?
Sure, sure. So
Okay.
Abby, Rosa, would you be able to chat in, or do you want them to just chat still,
I
Penny?
think chat would be good because then we have a log.
Okay, so Abby from room 1, would you be able to share that, please?
Okay, so a couple
I'll
of
just tell the next
people
person.
are saying, yep, and I'm just going to go ahead and start kind of responding to some of what I'm saying. So, okay, so yep, we definitely have people who are saying it's good writing. It's the writing process that's important, more so than the result on a test.
And Lindsay, could you do group 2, please? And Lee from room 4, if you'd be able to do that.
Okay, we have another group saying that, you know, part of this discussion is trying to determine the best use of time. Okay, we should address things, but be mindful of how much time we spend on it.
You asked for me also then?
Yes, please.
It's testing more than just writing. It's also because it's an argumentative essay.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we teach to prepare them? And also maybe just have it be an informative essay to help reduce stress was a big thing we talked about.
Mm-hmm. Lee, yep, I understand. In fact, that is kind of was part of the motivation behind kind of putting this together. I'll explain kind of in a few minutes, but I think you and I have some similar viewpoint there.
Okay, it looks like Lindsay shared hers. Penny?
Yep, and I'm kind of looking at Belinda's here. I'm just kind of doing a quick, I know I won't be able to respond to everything, so I'm just going to ask everybody to go ahead and take a moment to just get an idea of what other people were discussing. Yeah, I agree. There is a feeling of, is this fair or justice or that type of thing. Yep, Teresa's right. The need to scaffold this over, you know, a long period of instruction. Yeah, Abby, I like that, to use the writing. Okay, use the writing as a tool to work on other things. I like that concept a lot. Interesting. I haven't heard triaging, but I can understand why it feels that way. We're always trying to fill in the gaps and trying to make judgments on which is the most serious or the most critical at that time. I'm gonna have to chew on that concept, but I like that idea. I know it can feel that way. It's felt that way for me. And the many layers. Okay, feel free if you have other comments to go ahead and chat those in, but I am going to kind of move us along here. So I don't have a strong opinion. Honestly, my thoughts on the questions I gave you can change depending on the day, because I do think that it's that complex. But I do want to kind of encourage this. Regardless of where you fall as far as teaching and addressing the specific extended response task, please don't abandon Anchor 8, okay? I'm very concerned that by perhaps putting the extended response on the back burner, that we're also then stopping any sort of instruction towards reasoning skills. and I do think that Anchor 8, the reasoning skills, is really one of the best changes of our GED in 2014. And so I'm going to really encourage you to think of ways to address that. So I'm going to give you a few ideas. Here we go. A lot of my ideas are around this idea of creating academic conversations. So students are learning from one another and sharing their thinking, not necessarily duplicating a key that I create, you know, specifically the way I see it. But the value is more in discussing your thinking and your reasoning. One thing that I think it can work well to start building the foundation at a very kind of low language level is using a picture prompt. So I'm going to put a picture on the board and I'm going to ask you to, you know, jot this on a piece of paper. You could put it on chat. My first question is, how does the image support the claim? So the claim is that humans care about the environment. So I'll give you a moment to think, to write at home, or to share in chat, whatever you prefer, or all three. What details in that photograph support the claim that humans care about the environment? Okay, now I'm going to ask you to flip your thinking. What details in that image refute the claim that humans care about the environment? Good, I'm enjoying the comments that are coming in. Okay, so when I played this kind of game with myself, I said, well, we have a person who is cultivating the land. He's using animals, not machinery. It looks like there's some order to it. Perhaps he's using good techniques, okay? But the flip side of it is, well, a human is not leaving the environment in the natural state. There's questions as to whether this is a result of deforestation. Based on very few trees in the background, we don't know if there's fertilizers. There's a lot that we could read into the picture, but simply asking those questions can help, help start teaching the idea of support or refute without being very heavy unwritten language. Okay, I'll have you try one more. Got one more here. So same thing. What details in this image support the claim that humans care about the environment? Okay, now go ahead and look at it from another point of view. What details in that image refute the claim that humans care about the environment? Ooh, I like that idea that maybe a lot of buildings are facing south. Okay, perhaps I hadn't even thought of that. Yes, apartment buildings. So we have buildings that are being built up instead of out. Okay, some space on the horizon that has been left perhaps untouched. Yeah. Yep. Okay, Abby, I think you have a good idea. You could also change the claim a little bit, or you could get some other discussion questions from that image. Okay, why might they care? Should they care? I think there's a lot of different directions you could go with that. Okay. So I'll give you just a moment here to jot down any ideas. How could this look in your classroom? And if you have any questions for me, you can chat them at this time regarding that activity or the discussion. I'm going to double check something on my share. Okay, the second activity that I would recommend for helping to develop sort of those ideas of refuting, okay, can be used by combining TED Talks with text. Since having moved to online instruction, I'm really utilizing TED Talks more than I ever have in the past. I like to give my students a chance to listen to something before they read it, okay? So we're going to listen to a very brief TED Talk. This is the gentleman who is the subject of the movie and the book called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. He is definitely a developing English language learner. So his TED Talk is actually kind of an aided interview. I'm going to have you listen to that first, and then I'll show you an activity that I used with my students on that.
William, hi. Good to see you. Thanks. So we've got a picture, I think. Where is this?
This is my home. This is where I live.
Where? What country?
In Malawi, Kasungu. In Kasungu. Yeah, Malawi.
Okay. Now you're 19 now?
Yeah, I'm 19 years now.
5 years ago, you had an idea. What was that?
I want to make a windmill.
A windmill?
Yeah.
And so what, to power for lighting and stuff?
Yeah.
So what did you do? How did you realize that?
After I dropped out from school, I went to library and I read a book titled Using Energy, and I get information about windmill, and I try and I made it.
So
Oh no. Okay.
The links to the video and links to the document are in the chat box. So if you want to have people watch this on their own or watch it at a later date, it is available there.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. We can certainly continue with the activity without hearing his interview. It was a rather charming interview, so I wanted to give you a chance to kind of listen to him in his original voice. But I'm going to move on. So after we watched that interview, one of the things I do enjoy about TED Talks is most of their videos do come with transcripts. Okay, so I took the transcript and I put it onto a Google Doc, and then I took some statements. Oh, let's get this off here, and I'm going to make this just a bit larger. Okay. So he's from Nairobi, Kenya. Okay, so I'm telling my students it is a false statement. All right, find details in the transcript that refute that statement, that show it is false. Okay. We went through here, we went through here. I don't particularly love the layout of doing this in Google Docs. I need to improve my tech skills and see if this would work with a Padlet or a Jamboard or something else. But, but I think you can get the general idea of the activity. And so I'll go ahead now and I'll show you sort of the key, that this is what we've kind of produced as a result. So we had students, we had them kind of type their information, and then they even color coded and highlighted where that information came from the text. So again, kind of working on that concept of refuting, of showing that something is false. And it really was only 5 questions, okay? But that's another example of something that might work, especially in an online class. If I was doing this in a traditional setting, I would probably just have 2 documents side by side. I would have the text and then I would have the questions on another document. So it would be easier for them to refer to that. Okay, well, I'm disappointed the video didn't work. I'd recommend it's less than 6 minutes. So if you get it on your own, it's kind of fun to listen to. I would also recommend the movie or the book if you're looking for just a very good inspirational read. Okay. Again, so I'll flip over my timer here, and you have an opportunity to just jot down, how might this work in my classroom, or if you have some questions for me, feel free.
Okay.
Okay.
We can have people chime in, or you can chat into the chat box if you have a response to that.
Thanks. I'm going to go ahead and move on. But again, feel free to chat in questions, and I'll, what I can do to do that, to address those later. So if you've ever attended a presentation that I've given in person, you know that I'm very partial to an activity that I call sorts, which involves putting text on different pieces of paper and having students like physically sort them into categories on their tabletop. I like that as an in-person activity because the process of sorting, I expect my students to explain to their partner, to their classmate, why they're putting that particular piece of text in a certain category. So I feel that when you're in person, it really prompts some good academic discussions. I'm still working with that concept online. I do know that I have to look into some other, I think there's probably some other apps out there. Flipgrid is one I've heard about where we could physically kind of move things around on the screen. And my tech skills just aren't quite there yet. Oh, shoot. But what I've done instead is just using Google Slides is I take 3 of those pieces of papers. I give students a claim. Single-use bottled water should be banned. And then we have 3 pieces of evidence. And I ask my students to determine whether that evidence supports the claim, refutes the claim, and is irrelevant to the claim. Having previously defined that as something that supports the claim directly connects to both the topic and the main idea, something that refutes a claim, addresses the topic and main idea, but actually argues against it. And something that is irrelevant to the claim really doesn't address the main idea and has a very loose connection to the topic. That's how I define those. So take a moment and just play that kind of game with yourself. Which refutes, supports, or is irrelevant? Okay, and then there are the answers and an explanation as to why somebody might put it there. Again, the purpose of this activity is not necessarily to match exactly what kind of the teacher prepared, because there are times where a person could make an argument that a piece of evidence is supporting or refuting, okay? And so the value is in having students have that discussion, okay, and explain their thinking, more so than sort of matching a straight right or wrong answer. I also like to do sorts then with, well, I'll come to that in a minute, with pro-con. And all of this is coming from a website called procon.org. It's a wonderful website for arguments. So same sort of idea. Instead of sorting things physically, I'm just asking students to identify either like verbally or they can annotate on the screen. If your claim is that cell phones are safe, does this piece of evidence support, would that go in pro, meaning it supports the claim, or con, kind of refuting it, that idea? I would recommend keeping your claim the same and changing the evidence, because if the claim keeps changing, it really, it can create a great deal of confusion. So keep the same claim for the whole activity and change the evidence. So same thing, would this be a pro or a con piece of evidence? The third piece of evidence, same question. One more piece of evidence on that claim. And then this is how I sorted them. Okay, so if you want that feedback, you have it. At some point, Susan, I think somebody had a comment. How much time does it take to create these activities? It kind of depends on the activities. The sorts themselves, I think, is something that I can create in about 10 or 15 minutes, really. It's going to procon.com, and the website really does have the arguments laid out for you. And it has a citation for every piece of evidence, or everything that they give you. They do give you a citation to the original source if you want to. So a lot of it is just kind of choosing, and then designing a slide. And so there is some time. It isn't a pre-made activity, but it isn't requiring hours and hours of prep work either. The flip side of this too is it is possible to, perhaps even have your students create the activity if you choose. You can also kind of send them to the site or give them there might be some ways where they get some value in actually prepping the activity, because it's essentially the same whether you're doing the activity or you're prepping it. You're going through the same thought process, right? And then you might have something that you can use with students down the road, right? Okay, so those are two examples of sorts. Again, definitely a favorite activity of mine in person. I'm still working with my tech skills to make that a little more user-friendly online. Please jot down any ideas about how this could work in your classroom. Feel free to chat any questions you have for me. I'll take a moment to see if there's anything I missed. Okay. All right. Okay, so those are some activities to sort of build that foundation of reasoning skills without being tremendously text heavy. Now I do want to go into the articles, because we have a lot of resources out there of persuasive text. The New Readers Press has 2 books that contains a lot of really, really good materials, okay, for persuasive text, and lots of examples of persuasive text. And GED.com has got some samples. And even if our ultimate goal is not for students to write or to produce this glorious essay. I do think there's a lot of value in using those materials as exposure to persuasive text, okay? And so I'm not quite ready to give all of that up. So I'd like to just share with you some of how I've used that in the 6 years, okay? I do have a graphic organizer that I have used to help make sense of a persuasive article. My suggestion is when you're using graphic organizers, start small. Don't hand them the whole thing and fill it in. You might even just begin with 1 or 2 boxes on that organizer and have the rest filled in for them. So you begin by using a graphic organizer, you know, that is already partially completed, giving them examples of a full kind of thing. It's really important with graphic organizers that students understand that the organizer should be altered to fit the text. I have a lot of concrete learners who really struggle with that and will spend 10 minutes looking through a paragraph to find a 3rd reason because the skeleton of their graphic organizer has 3 reasons, okay? So we really need to work with them to understand that the text guides the graphic organizer, not the other way around, okay? I've also found from just the purpose of the way of creating a visual product that if we write words first and then we draw the boxes and the arrows and all of that, it creates a product that's more visually appealing. When students are trying to cram a lot of text into a box, okay, it sometimes almost defeats the purpose, okay, that it gets to be a little bit unreadable. What I'm going to walk you through is what I have done with students once I've done a lot of pre-teaching, okay? So we will have spent a month to probably 6 weeks on small mini lessons, learning what is a claim, a reason, evidence, warrant. These, in my class, these are the five types of evidence that we focus on. I think that's coming from the New Reader's Press book. And then these are 4 to 5 qualities of evidence that we focus on. And so each of these is a mini lesson, okay, before we get to what I'm going to throw all of you into now, okay? So understand that. So the first part of a graphic organizer for persuasive text is identifying the claim and identifying the reason behind that claim, okay? And for, intermediate readers, particularly who might just be starting out on this, this is plenty. This is plenty for the first few articles, okay? There's actually a tremendous amount of thinking that's involved in just creating those 4 boxes, okay? Then you can move on to the discussing, so what evidence is supporting that reason? And then the final step is they refer to it as the warrant, which the way I interpret that is the evidence strong or weak? An evaluation of the quality of the evidence, okay? So we do have a link to a blank copy of this type of graphic organizer in the folder, okay, for you to, use should you choose to sometime in the future. What I would like to do in kind of our remaining minutes here in class is to try using it, okay, is to try using this organizer. So we're going to go into an article called Teens and Cell Phones. I'll display that on my screen. I think Andy, feel free to put that into chat if you like. This is coming from the materials that are available on GED.com. Thanks, Andy. Okay. And I think what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to give you about 5 minutes. And what I'd like you to do is read. We're just going to read the very first article here, source material 1. I'd like you to read passage 1. Are tweens ready for cell phones? And then if you have time, if you feel free to look at passage 2. So I'll give you about 5 minutes right now to kind of move on here. Please feel free to have that text available, like on another window on a screen. When I did this online, okay, so in my classes, we had built the foundation in the fall, and in the winter students were starting to kind of fill out graphic organizers in groups, and my more advanced students were then turning those graphic organizers into essays, you know, outside of class. They were doing writing. So when we made the transition to online learning, in my particular situation, I got very lucky, okay, because we had kind of built that foundation. And so I was able to get some of those practice passages like mailed to my students, okay? And so then I could focus on just having the graphic organizer on the screen. Okay, I understand in our setting that's not going to work quite so well. It's going to require you to do some flipping back and forth, but I think you can get the gist of it. So my first question, you can feel free to put this into chat, is we're going to focus like just on that first article on are tweens ready for cell phones? Okay, so my first question is, what is the claim of that article? Go ahead and chat your kind of responses to that in the chat box, please. Okay, not entirely certain if we're just in the afternoon slump right now, or if, you know, I have some things coming in here. Okay, good. Yeah, we do have some responses. I think right now what I'm going to just go ahead and do is give you a little bit of modeling on this to give you an idea of what I might have done with students. I'm going to keep the language pretty simple. Okay, give tweens cell phones. Okay, kind of captures the claim. It's not a complete sentence, but note-taking shouldn't be complete sentences, especially if it's designed to be used on a timed test. Okay, so we're also working on those skills. When we dig into her article, we'll notice that her article really only had 2 reasons, not 3. So first reason is that the cell phones are a way to connect, right? Parents and children. And the second reason that she had in there was that the cell phones promote independence. Okay, so I'm not going to fill in the third reason. In fact, if I was, you know, drawing this on a sheet of paper, I wouldn't even draw in a third arrow or a third box. Again, adjusting the organizer to fit the text. Okay, I recognize there's a lot of, this is difficult thinking, that the language is not particularly challenging, but the thinking involved is challenging. It's not what we normally, you know, do in kind of our day-to-day basis kind of thing. So the next thing is, what kind of evidence did the author give? And so this is where I would refer back. The students actually have a handout to help them remind them statistics, expert opinion, specific example, scientific study, refute the counterclaim. Nope. And so in that, for that particular reason, they had a survey from the National Conservatory. It said 60% of children ages 8 to 12 have cell phones. Okay. And then we refer back to our main diagram, and then we start to think, is that evidence relevant? Is it reliable? Is it logical? Is it factual? Is it sufficient? Again, really, really complicated, these really complicated concepts to think about. So again, my students have already been exposed to these ideas in previous lessons. Okay. And what most of them say is we think this is fairly strong because we see there is a statistic, so there's some data. We think the source is a source was given, so there's a reliable source to it. We think we can believe that. Some of the students, especially those who really grasp the concept of a logical fallacy, have said they think the bandwagon fallacy is being implied. Okay, that the implication is because the majority of the students, the majority of the children have cell phones, then it must be a good thing. Okay, so again, there isn't a particularly a right or a wrong answer, but there's value in noticing both of those things, okay. What I'd like you to do now is I'm going to give you a couple more minutes, and I'd like you to turn back to your article and see if you can identify some evidence and a warrant for that reason of promoting independence. And I'll give you about 2 minutes. I'll give you 2 or 3 minutes to work on that. Again, please feel free to chat your response if you wish. Okay. And what I have on the board now is sort of a neater example of perhaps kind of what my students produced from that. Again, a lot of work involved in getting students to this point. So I recognize that, and I recognize that not everybody has the time to kind of develop those kind of things. But I do think there is value in encouraging students to do a thought process of looking for claims, for evidence, for reasons, and then kind of evaluating. Okay. I think our society right now, myself included, are so prone to tune into the news sources that simply confirm what we already believe. And I think these kind of activities push us out of our bubble of comfort and push us to stop looking for confirmation of our opinion, and to really consider the evidence behind an argument, and to look at facts rather than the opinions. And I think that's something that we all can benefit from. I know that I've gained a lot by even working on trying to teach this kind of stuff to my students. Okay. And then I do have kind of the different resources that I used in putting this together. There are links to some of the kind of activities, that kind of thing. And I think we have about 5 minutes left. So what I'd like to do at this point is just open it up for any final kind of questions, clarifications, ideas. And please don't, my goal is if there's anything, if there's even one thing that you can take into your classroom to encourage your students to build some reasoning skills, then hopefully this hour and 15 minutes has been of value to you. That's what I hope for. But please let me know in chat if you have any other questions. One comment is the graphic organizer is also the graphic organizer that I have used when I do choose to send students into the writing phase. They write their essays off of that, but they wouldn't have to. You certainly could end things with just the graphic organizer. Thanks, Lenka. I'll look into that source. Thank you, Gail. Yeah, we are kind of at the end of the session, so I appreciate everybody who attended. Please feel free to email me if you have further questions. And you have a 15-minute break, and then you're going to be returning back to our conference for the last session.